This is my first video update from Belgrade, Serbia on a snowy Tuesday afternoon here in Belgrade, April 4th. And check it out. The snow has been coming down all day. All day it's been coming down, and it's mixed in with some rain, so you get that slush on the pavements, which is not my favorite thing, but the snow is nice. It is nice. We don't get much snow in Greece and Cyprus, so this is a welcome change. Unfortunately, I was not prepared for this very cold weather and for a snowy April day, so I did not have the proper clothes for this weather. I had to actually stop at one of the kiosks, which is located in the city center, which sells the tourist stuff, and I bought a scarf, a Serbia football scarf, and that is keeping me warm. The scarf of Serbia is keeping me nice and warm. So let's talk about some news. And we have got to talk about the big spring counteroffensive, which everyone is talking about. I mean, everybody is talking about it. NATO, the White House, EU, the Elensky regime, collective West mainstream media. The New York Times had an article the other day, and they said that the big offensive from the Ukraine military is just about ready. It's going to be happening any day now. The goals of the offensive are for the Ukraine military to move east through Donbass, actually through Donetsk, and then cut down south. And according to the New York Times, what the Ukraine military will do is that they will split the Russian army in two. They will create two zones, according to the New York Times. They will cut Russian military supplies. They will mess up the Russian logistics. And the New York Times claims that one of the goals of this offensive is to move the Ukraine military within striking range of Crimea. That is what the New York Times is reporting. The New York Times also said that with a successful spring offensive, it will mean that the Elensky regime will get more money and more weapons. That is what the New York Times is reporting. Elensky, in a statement he made yesterday, he said that he wishes for Vladimir Putin to live the rest of his life in a basement with a bucket, no toilet, just a bucket. That was the statement from Elensky. And Elensky also issued a warning to all of Russia and to the Russian military. He said that this is Russia's last chance. If the Russians do not leave, well, then the Ukraine military will destroy them. That was Elensky's final warning to the Russian military. Leave now, or else you will be destroyed. And so Elensky yesterday met with the finance slash energy slash Green Party czar Robert Habeck, a jack of all trades for the Olaf Scholz government, but a master of nothing. And he was in Kiev yesterday meeting with Elensky, and come tomorrow, Elensky will be in Poland meeting with Polish officials. Polish officials will not be traveling to Kiev. Elensky will be traveling to Poland. And this raises a lot of interesting questions and speculation, because the way I see this, they are going to be talking about something that is very important and has to be kept secret. I imagine the reason for Elensky going to Poland is because the planners of this offensive, and this is just my speculation, the planners of this big offensive, they don't want to risk having the Russians intercept any type of communication or discussion, which could be a risk if this meeting was held in Kiev. And so Elensky is going to personally go to Poland and to meet with Polish officials. What are they planning? Who knows? Who knows what is being planned? Is Poland going to enter this conflict? Is this some sort of D-Day type of plan that NATO, Poland, the United States, UK, is this a D-Day type of operation that they're putting together? I believe Brian Berletic at the New Atlas, in a video he did a couple of days ago, he mentioned the D-Day word, in that this is Ukraine's final chance. This is the collective West's final chance to achieve some sort of victory or some sort of negotiating leverage as is related to this conflict. This is it. They've got one more shot left, and so this is some sort of a D-Day type of planning that is taking place. So it's going to be interesting to see whether this big offensive does happen, or if this is just all bluff. Big words from Elensky. He is telling the Russians, surrender now or be destroyed. He tells Putin or he wishes that Putin lives in a basement with just a bucket. Elensky also spoke with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau yesterday, and this was over the phone or over Zoom or whatever he uses to speak to Trudeau. And Elensky thanked Trudeau for the support. He thanked Trudeau for the money. He tweeted out about this. He said, I had a phone call with Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau. I thanked him for the $2.4 billion in aid to the Ukrainian budget and significant defense support. We discussed in detail the situation on the battlefield and further security needs of Ukraine. So you had an Elensky phone call with Trudeau as well. The whole spring offensive thing has taken on a very cinematic feel to it. There's no doubt about that. And the collective West and NATO and the Ukraine military, they are going to have to launch an offensive. They've committed themselves to do this. If they don't launch an offensive, it'll be a media PR disaster. One of the reasons they need to launch that offensive is to keep the morale and the money coming in. So the morale is very down in Ukraine and in the collective West, in Europe especially, and they need to boost the morale by taking territory. And of course, they need to convince all of the countries involved in Project Ukraine to continue to pour in money and weapons. So I feel like this spring offensive is going to happen, and it has to happen, but who knows? Maybe this is just Elensky acting. Maybe this is a big bluff. But I just feel like they've boxed themselves in and they've committed to this offensive, and so it has to take place in one form or another. I am getting reports from various channels, Telegram channels, YouTube channels, various other sources, which do claim that Ukraine has amassed large forces in the south of Ukraine so that they can launch this offensive to split the Russian forces in two. And there are also reports that Ukraine has amassed large forces outside of Bakhmut. I've heard reports of 50,000. I've heard all the way upwards to 80,000. And the goal there is for the Ukraine military to encircle the Wagner troops that have encircled Bakhmut. That's the goal of an offensive that could be taking place in the Bakhmut area, the Bakhmut region. So Wagner and the Russian military have encircled Bakhmut. The goal of this offensive is to encircle the Russian troops that have encircled Bakhmut. So we could be looking at an offensive on multiple fronts. And if Poland gets involved, well, who knows what we could be looking at. But I doubt that Poland's going to jump in. The only reason I mentioned Poland is because Elensky is going to be in Poland tomorrow. So Poland is obviously playing a pivotal role in the planning of this offensive, if we do indeed get an offensive. I just don't know how this thing is going to be pulled off, given the reports that Ukraine has only received something like 15 or 20% of the military hardware that they have been requesting over the last 6 months. So I'm not sure how all of this is going to happen. But we'll wait and see. The New York Times also reported that Ukraine has been holding back their elite forces in preparation for this spring offensive. They have not sent any of the elite forces, or at least have not sent many of the elite forces into the Bakhmut area, and they've been holding them back for this spring offensive. So that's what's going on there. We can talk about Nord Stream now. Let's talk about Nord Stream, a Washington Post article that was published the other day. Keep in mind, the Washington Post is the newspaper of the deep state, of the intel agencies. It is the DC Insider deep state paper. So keep that in mind as we discuss this article from the Washington Post. They reported that the EU leaders, European leaders, are very doubtful about the articles that were published by the New York Times and by German publications, which provided an alternative narrative to Seymour Hersh's explanation of what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline. The New York Times article said that it was Ukraine allies who were not connected to Elensky, as well as pro-Russian nationals, pro-Russian white supremacists who were anti-Putin but not connected to Elensky. And these groups blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And the German publications, they reported that Nord Stream was blown up by 5 scuba divers and 1 doctor on the Andromeda yacht. So those were the 2 narratives that were floated out about a month ago to contradict, to distract away from Seymour Hersh is reporting on the Nord Stream pipeline. And keep in mind that the New York Times article and the German articles that came out on Nord Stream were published 2 days after Olaf Scholz traveled to D.C. to meet with Joe Biden in the White House in a very secret meeting. No media statements, no press conferences, nothing. Just Olaf Scholz meeting with Biden, and who knows what they discussed. Though Seymour Hersh published an article and said that Olaf Scholz flew to D.C. so that Biden can fill him in on the cover stories, the cover-up stories that the CIA is going to be running via the New York Times, and the cover-up stories that the CIA is going to give to German intel so that they can run them through German publications. So we have all of this stuff being reported on Nord Stream. We have 3 different narratives: Seymour Hersh, the New York Times, and the German narrative. And the Washington Post is reporting that EU diplomats and EU officials do not believe the New York Times story, and they don't believe the German publications either. And the Washington Post even has a subheading in their article with the title, "Don't Talk About Nord Stream." And what the Washington Post reports is that when these EU officials have their meetings and they all sit around the big table in Brussels, they make it a point not to talk about Nord Stream. They look at each other, according to the New York Times, they look at each other, they want to ask each other questions like, did you have anything to do with Nord Stream? But they don't ask those questions. They're suspicious about the actions of certain EU members with regards to Nord Stream, but they don't say anything. They prefer to remain quiet, to remain silent. And the thinking from EU officials, this is what the Washington Post says, the thinking is that if they don't talk about it, then it'll just go away. It'll just vanish. The thinking of an 8-year-old child. If we don't deal with this problem, if we don't talk about this problem, it will just disappear. And I find this reporting from the New York Times to be incredible. It really is incredible. Don't talk about Nord Stream. Just don't talk about it. First rule of Fight Club, don't talk about Fight Club. First rule about Nord Stream, don't talk about Nord Stream. They all have their suspicions. They all kind of know what's going on. They doubt the New York Times article. They doubt the German publication. They doubt those narratives, but they just don't want to talk about it. Washington Post says that many EU officials are afraid to talk about it because if they talk about it, it could jeopardize Project Ukraine. It could jeopardize the money and the weapons to Project Ukraine, of which all of them are heavily invested in from a political level as well as a financial level. So they just don't want to jeopardize Project Ukraine. The Washington Post article also says that there's a lot of talk in Europe that perhaps Poland and Ukraine blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Poland did it now. Oh boy. And they don't want to confront Poland. They don't want to question Poland. They're just silent on this. And I say, why not? Why not blame it on Poland? I'm sure that the Biden White House would be able to convince the leadership in Poland to take one for the team and just come out and say, we blew up Nord Stream. I think that the Biden White House could probably convince the Polish leadership to do that. Look, they have the Sikorsky tweet. Remember that tweet from Sikorsky, the one-time foreign minister of Poland, and he's also, I believe, a European Parliament member for Poland. I think he's a European Parliament member for Poland, but he's a very high-level diplomat and official in Poland, and he put out that tweet after Nord Stream was blown up with the text "Thank you, USA" and a picture of the blown up pipeline, the water, kind of bubbling up from the environmental disaster of blowing up that pipeline. And look, you have Sikorsky. He said, "Thank you, USA." For Olaf Scholz and for Germany, that would be great if they could pin this on Poland. I think the Germans would like nothing more than to pin the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage on Poland, especially because Poland is really laying into Germany with the World War II reparations, the 1.3 trillion in reparations. They continue to go hard against Germany with those reparations. So I imagine Olaf Scholz would love to say, you know what? Forget about the reparations. You blew up our pipeline. Even Steven? Even Steven? You want 1.3 trillion? You blew up our pipeline. Can we just call it even? That would be great for Germany. Anyway, that's the Washington Post article in a nutshell. I'll put a link to the article down below so you can read it. The interesting thing about the article, and the reason I believe the Washington Post is publishing it, is because the article really doesn't talk about the Biden White House much, if at all. And I think what the Washington Post is doing by publishing this article is that they are trying to take the Nord Stream problem, which is really bothering the Biden White House. You can tell they're very bothered by the whole Nord Stream thing. They want it to go away. And I think what the Washington Post is doing, they're publishing an article on Nord Stream, and they're making it completely European. What the Washington Post writes in the article is almost 98% about Europe and the EU. And I think what the Washington Post is doing is they're making the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage into a European problem, and they're distancing it from the Biden White House. That's what I think they're doing. That's why they hardly mention the Biden White House. They don't talk about it. They don't mention Biden. They don't mention Newland, Sullivan. It's all about Europe and how Europe is bothered with Nord Stream and how Europe doesn't want to talk about Nord Stream. And maybe it's Poland. Maybe it's Poland and Ukraine. It's all Europe. It's a European problem. Let's keep it a European problem and let's distance it from the U.S. and the Biden White House. I think that's what the Washington Post is up to as they publish this article. So that was the article from the Washington Post. EU officials they just don't know who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and they have their suspicions, but they don't dare voice those suspicions out loud. If only there was some sort of video statement from some high-level collective West official, I don't know, like maybe the President of the United States or someone like in Victoria Nuland's position, like a Deputy Secretary of State. If only there was some video evidence of a statement of one of these officials saying something along the lines of, we'll take care of the Nord Stream pipeline, or we'll blow it up, or it'll be a hunk of metal at the bottom of the ocean. If only the authorities had this type of video evidence. If only this existed. Oh, man. The Washington Post article, by the way, also says that the Andromeda story, the Andromeda narrative, the Gilligan's Island thing, it was probably some sort of distraction being put out there in order to distract from what really happened to Nord Stream. And perhaps there wasn't just one Andromeda. Perhaps there were many ships. Perhaps the Andromeda ship was a decoy. But basically, they said that the whole thing seemed to be some sort of a distraction operation, and that even German authorities investigating the pipeline sabotage, they say that the breadcrumbs of information and evidence that have come their way just seems too convenient. Something doesn't add up, finding explosive residue in on the table of the Andromeda yacht. It's almost too convenient, and the German authorities are kind of hinting at the fact that maybe all of this is being done to steer them off course from finding out who the real culprits are. If only the German authorities had video evidence of someone in a high position talking about blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. If only that existed, I'm positive it would make the German investigators' jobs a whole lot easier. So let's, should we do a couple of more stories? Let me see here. Let me see what I got on this snowy Belgrade spring day. The spring counteroffensive that will be happening in Ukraine. Not if the weather is like this. How about we talk about the elections in Montenegro real quick? There were elections in Montenegro that took place the other day, and the results are quite shocking, actually, because the man who was in power in Montenegro for 33 years, Mr. Djukanovic, he lost. He lost the elections, the presidential runoff, and he lost it to the 36-year-old Jakov Milatovic. So this guy was in power for 33 years. Many people called him the dictator of Montenegro, but he had elections. He lost, and now we have a new president in Montenegro. And from what I understand, I could be wrong about Milatovic, but from what I understand, he's kind of like a pro-EU, but also pro-Serbian leader. I guess that's what many analysts are describing his leanings as. He's pro-EU. He said he's going to take Montenegro into the EU in 5 years, but he's also very pro-Serbian because he also ran on a platform where he said that Montenegro will have friendly relations with all of their neighbors. Why you want to enter the EU, especially in 5 years, doesn't make any sense. There won't be an EU in 5 years to enter. I'm thinking, I'm guessing, but who knows? Maybe there will be an EU to enter in 5 years. Maybe it'll be a different kind of EU. We'll see. We will see. So that was the election in Montenegro. Let's do a couple of quick stories as well. I think Montenegro's in NATO. I believe they're in NATO. So I guess if you're in NATO, the next move is to enter the European Union. But NATO is actually trying to get all of the member states to pledge 500 million a year to Ukraine in perpetuity. This is above and beyond the military aid and whatever other money goes to the Elensky government. Stoltenberg wants NATO member states to pledge that they're going to put $500 million into a slush fund forever for the Elensky regime. Nice. How's that for a nice scam? Now you know why so many politicians want to enter NATO. When you get money schemes like this, it's hard to resist wanting to enter into NATO, isn't it? 500 million every year going to Elensky, and all of the NATO officials and the politicians are going to get their cut of that 500 million forever. Of course they want to enter NATO. Let's see. How about some de-dollarization news, and then we'll get to our clown world. India will trade in rupees with 18 countries. They are trading outside of the US dollars. They're going to be trading in rupees with 18 countries, is according to Reuters. This has already taken effect. This trade policy has taken effect on April 1st. India is prepared to trade in rupees with nations facing a shortage of dollars so as to, and I quote, disaster-proof them effectively and effectively boost its exports. Commerce Secretary Suni Barthwal told a news conference in the capital, New Delhi. So they're going to trade outside of dollars in rupees to disaster-proof their trade. How's that for a choice of words there? It doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the future of the USD as reserve currency, does it? When you're going to trade in rupees in order to disaster-proof your trade policy. And the big news from Bloomberg, which came out yesterday, which is that China's yuan has replaced the US dollar as the most traded currency in Russia for the first time. And Lavrov said in a speech that half of the payments between Russia and China are made through the national currencies of both sides, excluding the dollar. Yep. De-dollarization. In India, de-dollarization in Russia. Incredible stuff happening. Let's do a clown world and wrap this video up. And this clown world has to be about Trump. Because Trump is on his way to New York. He's probably in New York right now. And the mainstream media are acting like a bunch of clowns. They followed Trump's plane from Florida to They followed Trump's plane from Florida to New York, and that was like their news cycle for the whole day yesterday. And all the mainstream media publications in the U.S. are going absolutely crazy about this court appearance from Trump, and they're losing their freaking minds about Trump, while the U.S. dollar is losing its place in the world. They say they're going to put a gag order on Trump. They're thinking about a gag order so that he can't speak about the trial, and they're just going to try to shut him up. What a bunch of clowns. What a bunch of clowns these people have become. They're destroying their country. I mean, this looks bad in the United States, but on the world stage, they are destroying the reputation of the United States, and they don't care. And they don't care. And they've got nothing on Trump. I mean, they've got nothing on Trump. But from what I understand, they have something like 30 or 40 charges that they're throwing at Trump, kind of like taking spaghetti and throwing it against the wall and whatever sticks, you know? So they're going to charge Trump with like 30 different things or 40 different things, and whatever they can get him on. I mean, it's just pathetic and sad. But it is a clown world. It's a clown world, no doubt about it. And so the timing of all of this is what's most interesting, because all of this was timed. All of this is timed to coincide with the 2024 election and the 2024 campaign. And so I believe that their goal is to shut Trump up, to vanish him somehow, to keep him quiet somehow, so that he's a non-issue with the 2024 election. And that's why this is being timed right now, because it leads perfectly into the Republican 2024 election campaigning. From what I understand, this has made Trump a whole lot more popular. Like his poll ratings are surging, from what I understand. Support is just through the roof, but they have no reverse gear, as we've said many times. They have no reverse gear, and they're going to continue to push forward to try and silence Donald Trump, a one-time president of the United States, and prevent him from going up against, most likely, Joe Bidenopoulos, Greece's favorite son. All right. So that's my video, everybody. I'm not going to lie. This video was a tough one, given the weather conditions. Anyway, that's the Hotel Moskva, the famous Hotel Moskva. And I am going to sign off. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rockfin and Rumble and BitChute, ODYSEE, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. And what else do I want to say? Instagram, until April 18th, we are running a giveaway. So follow us on Instagram, the Duran shop, just the Duran shop on Instagram. I'll put a link down below for that in the description box. And we're running a giveaway, shirts, mugs, hats, all kinds of good stuff. If you follow us on our Instagram page, which is 100% about the shop. And 10% off when you use the code GOODDAY on the Duran shop. Take care.